Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm your comedy coach, Linda Landeros. In this video, I want to give you an introduction to the way I teach comedy. And I teach it the same way, whether it's stand-up, improv, sketch, whether you're doing comedy for the stage or for social media. This lesson is the backbone to the Your Comedy Coach approach to teaching comedy. And basically, it's this. All comedy is figurative. Language, that is. Everything that makes us laugh is a form of figurative language. Now, I go over this in more detail in my online course, Intro to Comedy, which you can learn more about by clicking the link in the description box. So today's video is going to be sort of a condensed version of that, and we're only going to go over one example of figurative language at the end of this lesson. Now, here's the thing. If you stick with this channel long enough, everything I teach in that Intro to Comedy course, I'll eventually teach it here on this YouTube channel. So if you can't afford to buy the course at this point in time, no worries. Just subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next time I drop a video. And of course, comment below and let me know what it is that you would like to specifically learn as it pertains to comedy and social media. Okay, so what is figurative language? I promise you, you already know what figurative language is. It's something you went over in elementary school. You just need a little refresher. So figurative language is language that is the opposite of literal. It's a form of communication that does not stick to the strict meaning of a word or a phrase. We use figurative language all the time to give the way we speak and write some creative flourish and a little sense of individuality. So let's go over some different types of figurative language, and then we'll hone in on one specific example as it pertains to joke writing. Let's start off with our first example, and these two forms of figurative language are very similar with one key difference. So let's talk about similes and metaphors. Similes and metaphors are both comparisons. The difference is a simile uses the word like or as to make the comparison. A metaphor does not. A metaphor just says you are the thing that you're comparing yourself to. For example, she is as cold as ice. That's a simile because we use the word as. An example of a metaphor is she's a ray of sunshine. She's not actually a ray of sunshine. We're just using that to describe her personality. Some other examples of figurative language include alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of the consonant sound at the beginning of a word. For example, Peter Piper picked up a peck of pickled peppers. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds in nearby words. For example, the rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain. Now I want to watch My Fair Lady. Consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds. For example, weak and weary. Another example of figurative language is personification. Personification is when you give something that is not human-like traits. For example, the wind howled. Silence crept into the room. Obviously, silence is not a thing that can creep in or out one way or another, but that particular wording and the image it provokes, it's very different than just saying the room was quiet. Hyperbole, which is exaggerated speech in order to emphasize a point. For example, when we say, "Oh, I'm starving to death," we aren't. But unfortunately, there's people in the world who are, which is very, very sad. Repetition. Repetition, it's when you repeat something. For example, the poem, The Raven. We constantly hear that word nevermore repeated. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Repetition in comedy is part of how we establish a pattern and part of how we create a game. Now, these are concepts we'll cover in a future lesson, so if they don't make sense right now, that's fine. A good example of repetition in a comedy is the callback. We establish a joke and then we reference it later on. We're repeating the joke, but we're tying it into something different and unexpected. Litotes are the opposite of hyperbole. They are understatements. You hear them all the time. In fact, a lot of sarcasm is just litotes. For example, if a hurricane is approaching, you might say something like, "Oh, looks like we're gonna get some rain." These are just some forms of figurative language. There are more. I encourage you to do some independent study to get better acquainted with those other ones. Because today what we're gonna focus on is the simile. The simile, as you'll recall, is a comparison that uses the word like or as. Let me give you some examples from actual comedians. We're repping vaccines like we're in gangs. This is a Bob the Drag Queen joke. He goes on to say, we look at people who have Johnson & Johnson vaccines like they have prepaid phones. And then he kind of acts out like, ugh, oh my God. You can hear the comparison. We look at Johnson & Johnson like they're prepaid phones. We're comparing vaccines to gangs. And we're comparing the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to something that's also really cheap in quality. Another example from one of my favorite comedians, Jabuki Young White. Imagine getting killed by COVID after telling everyone it isn't real. That's like Santa slitting your throat. I think I got this from his Twitter. There's a lot of COVID stuff in this example. This is not COVID related. I guess I fell upon a theme here. Okay, but here's another one that doesn't involve COVID. And this is from another one of my favorite comedians, Hassan Minhaj. Hindus and Muslims are like the Montagues and Capulets of India. These similes serve an important purpose because in comedy, you should be able to talk about your life and who you are, no matter how relatable or not it is. And in the case of like this last example from Hassan Minhaj, Hindus and Muslims are like the Montagues and Capulets of India. He's giving us an example of two predominant groups in India. And if you're someone who knows nothing about Indian culture or history, but you know something about Romeo and Juliet, he's using something that we do know something about, which is Romeo and Juliet, and he's comparing it to something that he presumes his audience does not know a whole lot about, which is the different ethnic groups in India and how they get along. Similes are very easy to hear and identify in comedy, and they are also very easy to recreate. So your homework, should you decide to take this lesson and apply it to real life so you can get better at comedy, your homework is twofold. One, I want you to watch a comedy special, a stand-up special, a sitcom, a funny movie. I think you should watch a stand-up special though. I think it'll work best with this. I want you to watch something that's funny, and then I want you to write down the similes that you hear. And they're going to be easy to identify because remember, we're looking for the words like or as to make a comparison. And I guarantee you, you will hear it in a stand-up special. Your second assignment, should you choose to do this on your own for nothing in return other than the fact that you're going to get better at comedy, I want you to start incorporating more similes into your everyday expression. Instead of saying, it's hot today, say, it's like Satan's butthole in here, or I'm as hot as a Pedro Pascal edit on TikTok. This is probably gonna feel like a second grade grammar lesson at first, but I promise you, the more you develop an ear for identifying figurative language, and the more you just practice writing and incorporating them into your jokes, the more organically they're gonna come to you. So you won't have to be fishing for things to compare. It's gonna become your natural way of speaking. All right, well, that's all I've got for you for today. If you have any questions about this lesson or anything else, please let me know in the comments. Also, let me know what you would like to learn in future comedy coaching videos. Let me know in the comments. And as always, if you want to support this channel, make sure to subscribe, turn on the alert notifications bell, and share this channel. Share this with other comedians and aspiring comedians, or anyone who aspires to be funny or just learn a little something about comedy. See you in the next video.